Tonight's special guest is Seeby Woodhouse. Seeby is in a position many baby boomers would envy as we all near retirement. $24 million in the bank and retired at 29. Seeby founded Orcon, sold it 5 years ago, and at the tender age of 35 is now setting out once again in the telecommunications industry. We welcome Seeby Woodhouse as our special guest on The Beat Goes On. Seeby Woodhouse, welcome to The Beat Goes On.
Thanks very much for having me.
You've got to be one of our most, youngest special guests in some time. And, well, how old are you now, Seeby?
35.
35.
So I'm getting on a bit now.
35. It seems very young to us, but I suppose you think to yourself, 35, oh, I'm getting old. Is that the case? Or?
Yeah, well, it was only yesterday I was 30, I guess, so yeah, it does tend to creep up on you.
And what a great name, Seeby. Where would that have come from?
My father's into languages, so he knows about 7 languages, and mainly useless ones, Latin and ancient Greek and all that sort of thing. So he just made it up. It's spelt S-E-E-B-Y, but the closest analogy is the the Roman god of youth, which is spelt C-E-B-E. But it means a whole lot of different things. But you know, I'm unique as far as I know. So if you Google me, I come straight up. There's no ambiguity there.
Now, when your dad at the christening or named you Seeby, he had no idea that his son Seeby would be worth 20 million at the
Probably
age
not, no.
at 29.
No. Both my parents are librarians, so they're both very sort of educated and well read and that kind of thing. And I guess my father's quite non-traditional in that he's quite eccentric, but he's also quite traditional in that he sort of expected me to sort of have a normal kind of thing. So I dropped out of university to start Allcon, which was my first sort of big success, pretty much the only job I've ever had, or the only company, you know, it was the first thing I did really. And so he just about kicked me out of home because he was like, why would you want to deal with this stupid internet thing, you know, you should go and get a degree. So
get a proper job.
I like to tease him that I've got a PhD in results. So
Now, let's go back to that time. You started Orcon. Did you say you were living at home?
Yes,
you were living at home, and you came home one day and you said, Dad, Mum, I'm going to start a company for people if they want emails, etc., etc. And they looked at you blankly and they said, what are you talking about, son? Did they say that?
Wasn't quite as straightforward as that. My interest in the internet was more stems from an interest in business. So when I was 11 years old, I had a sort of very vivid memory of my dad smashing my piggy bank to get the last sort of dollars out to put into Goldcorp, and you know, just before the 1987 crash. And there's a saying that if your plumber's getting into the stock market and giving you tips, then it's time to get out. And I guess my parents were kind of the plumbers, you know, librarians that weren't too sophisticated. So the thinking of my dad was that, well, Goldcorp's got a whole lot of gold back in the shares, so if it all turns to shit, we've still got gold. But the trouble was Goldcorp was just printing, pieces of paper.
Yeah, they were.
So their business was printing certificates, so we lost sort of the most money of everything. So we had to remortgage our house, and I guess at that point I didn't really understand, but I sort of thought, well, these business people seem like they're a bit more clever than my parents. I thought my parents were the most clever people on the whole planet.
Yeah.
So maybe I should get into business. And so I was a man in search of an opportunity. And when I was at school, I was in the first sort of years of the Young Enterprise program, which is where you start a business at school. And I did those quite unsuccessfully. But I was in search of an idea, and as soon as I heard about the internet, I had a lecturer at university who said the internet's doubling in size every 3 months in the US. It's this thing, and there's email and that kind of thing, and of course it didn't exist. So it seems bizarre for a young person to sort of remember when there was a time before time, but it was only 15 years ago. And I sort of thought, shit, if anything's doubling in size every 3 months, it's got to be a good investment. That's
but there's always a great step. A lot of people may have had that thought, said, heard exactly what, but the difference is you went out and did something about it.
Yeah, a lot of people sort of say, how did you envisage this company that was going to be worth $20 million and all those kind of things? That's just not like how life works.
No,
I guess I just had a passion to be involved in business. That's what I wanted to do. I'm a very independent thinker. I didn't like the idea of working for someone else. I had kind of one job and I got told what to do, and I thought I could do it better than the boss, so it just annoyed me. And so I just wanted to strike out on my own, but it was just very much a process of sort of one foot in front of the other. So from my days doing Young Enterprise at school, I learned what a company was, the difference between a shareholder and director, how to set it up, that kind of thing. So the first thing was I sort of thought, I'm going to have the biggest internet company in the world. because the internet's going to grow and be big. So I didn't know what it was going to do. I had $100 in my bank account, was living at home, but I just sort of had this vision. As soon as I heard that it was this kind of big thing, I just had this vision, I'm going to have the world's biggest internet company. And of course, maybe that was a stupid goal for me to have.
Hey,
but if you don't aim for the moon, you
Yeah.
never get out the atmosphere. If you sort of aim for a small hill,
Yeah.
then half the time you get up a small hill. If you aim for the moon, chances are you might actually get out of the atmosphere or whatever. So, there's nothing wrong with aiming high. And then from that point, it was just a relentless kind of pursuit of what can I do every single day that gets me closer to this goal of having the world's biggest internet company. So even in things like picking the name, I chose a name that was unique because I figured if I had something like Auckland Internet Company, that was going to limit the growth, it wouldn't be global. So I picked a sort of non-specific name that didn't really mean anything, with a cool logo. I kind of looked at technology companies like Microsoft and I saw that it was a combination of words, so micro computers, software, that kind of thing. And I just chose names that were sort of vaguely and sounded internet-y, and there's obviously like telecom and telecon and telephone and all those kind of things. So I just thought Orcon was kind of a prefix, or for sort of maybe alternative or organic or environmental or something, and con rather than com. It's basically a made up word that was globally unique, so that I could
Lucky you didn't come up with Enron.
Yeah, true. Maybe they would have come up with Allcon and it could be
a different story. But tell us about your very first premises. Was it in your bedroom, or did you hire a room and put the server in?
At first I worked out of my bedroom and annoyed the hell out of my dad, so I had a separate phone line for the business, and when I was out my dad would pick up the phone and say, "Oh, stop calling here, you're annoying the hell out of me," if someone would call too many times. So he was not great for the business in the early days. And in the early days he had modems that made a terrible racket, so I sort of had 3 or 4 phone lines coming into the house, and every time someone would dial up the service, there'd be this sort of terrible screeching sound that a modem makes, and so it was driving my dad half mental. But as soon as I started making a little bit of money, I moved out to a tradesman's shed in Albany. And it was basically just like a sort of premises that automotive people kind of have. So I had like a roller door and a tiny little sort of space, and where someone would store a car or something like that. It was basically like a little garage, but I could sort of put computers and have a desk. And
how many clients would you have had at that in the garage there in Albany? About
probably a couple of hundred.
A couple
like
of hundred.
Yeah.
Did it double every 3 months?
Yeah, I mean the thing about being in business is it's much easier to succeed if you hitch your wagon to a horse that's going somewhere rather than a dead donkey. So, my thinking around the internet was that if the internet's doubling in size every 3 months, then 16 times in a year, then even if I ran a completely miserable company, at least I'd get 100% growth in a year. And yeah, I guess everyone at that time sort of got dragged along by the success. So at one stage in New Zealand there was 160 small internet companies, but as the market matures and people decide that they want to be with someone that's doing a good job, those all sort of aggregate down. It's just as any market, you get a lot of new entrants, and then the more efficient companies end up going on to succeed.
So what was the day, and even Dad would give you the credit for this, what was the day that you knew, gosh, I've made it? How many years into it?
Well, I was 19 when I started, and I always sort of had a dream, even when I was young, probably 10 or 12 years old, that I was going to own a Ferrari by 25. That was kind of my milestone. So on my 25th birthday I bought a Ferrari.
Wow.
I paid cash, and I think that was probably
was the day.
The arrival day.
And did Dad apologise for answering the phone in the wrong manner?
No, no, it's sort of strange. My parents broke up not long after I started the company, so he was kind of annoyed that I was doing it, annoyed that I wasn't going to university, broke up. Went to live in the South Island. I didn't really see him for 10 years, and then it was a bit mystifying to him because I sort of went and visited him when I had a Ferrari, and actually one of the first times that was quite strange is I had a racing team in the New Zealand V8 touring cars, and we had 2 cars and a huge big truck and Orcon all over it, and a whole bunch of promo girls and a support team and like 20 people in this kind of thing, and we toured around the country driving race cars, and as a young guy in my 20s, it was a cool thing to do to have a race team, but we were spending $500,000 a year on just automotive fun. And we went to Christchurch, I think it's Ruapuna down there, and I sort of told my dad, he was in Christchurch, so I said, I'm down in Christchurch this weekend, come and hang out at the racetrack and I'll meet you. And he didn't really have any appreciation for the sort of company he kind of knew, but in the South Island, obviously, you know, Orcon wasn't that well known, and just so I hadn't seen anything, and you know, just kind of didn't really have any idea. And then I sort of turned up with this huge sort of parade of race cars and, you know, a truck and, you know, girls and all this sort of thing. And he was sort of quite just sort of, you know, and then ever since then he's kind of been a bit, you know, just sort of hasn't quite understand. He's visited my house. I have a $10 million house on the North Shore, which was a bit of an extravagance. But, you know, sort of came and was like, it's just a bit of a mystery to him, really.
Now, you grew and grew and grew, of course, and Orcon became a great company, and then one day you had the offer that somebody made you an offer you couldn't refuse. Is that right? When
I made the decision to sell Orcon, the situation was that there was more opportunity and that you could make more money by buying unbundled lines from telecom wholesale, and then there was much more margin to be had than there was previously just sort of reselling, you know, telecom services. But the issue was that you had to invest a huge amount in infrastructure. So I took on $30 million of debt in Allcon, and we were building network, and, you know, our profitability was going sky high, but our cash flow was going even further south. So I worked out that we sort of had a year or 6 months left of cash, and I'd funded the company 100% from inception. I had no external investors whatsoever. So you know, I sort of figured, well, the company's going to, you know, something's going to happen. So I needed either to get investment or to sell the company, and in the end I decided to sell the company.
Once investors come in, maybe it takes the fun out of it, doesn't it? So,
yeah, well, I didn't want to be beholden to anyone else.
But you had fun. That was great days. I know you worked hard, and it's always the great question, was it luck or was it hard work?
Well, I think it's easy to have a good idea. There's people that come up to me all the time and say, oh, Seeby, give me some money, I've got this great idea. And I sort of say, well, you know, hang on, it's the execution that makes the money. It's easy to have a good idea. Everyone has good ideas, you know, but it's the executing is hard. But everything in life is half luck too. You know, I was obviously in the right place at the right time. You know, there's a number of people that saw that the internet was going to be big and kind of thought, oh, we should get in. And you know, a lot of people got excited during the dot-com boom days and all that sort of thing. So a lot of people had similar ideas, but I guess not everyone was able to execute. So, you know, part of it was luck living in that time. Part of it was coming from the right parents. Part of it was, you know, whatever. So I don't think you can ever get too arrogant. You know, if I'd grown up in Somalia or something, then you know, I wouldn't be here talking to you, and I wouldn't have an internet company, and I wouldn't have made a whole lot of money. So you've got to be grateful for the things that life delivers, but when it delivers something, you've got to take advantage of it.
Now, it's the morning after you've sold Orcon. You've got $20 million in the bank. You wake up and you say to yourself, what am I going to do today? Tell us about that day.
Yeah, well, it was pretty
depressing.
Did it happen? It did happen, but it was pretty depressing in the end, to be honest. I was 29 years old. I had 9 different companies. You know, some trading companies, some intellectual property, but I owned one of the most popular bars in town. I had a radio station. I had all this stuff. You know, it wasn't just Orcon. I was really, you know, pushing 100% at a million miles an hour, trying to be, you know, the world's most awesome entrepreneur. You know, I won the Young Entrepreneur of the Year, the Young Achiever of the Year in 2004. So I kind of felt like I was this kind of boy wonder, and you know, couldn't seem to do anything wrong. And then I decided, I was just going to retire at 30 and I'll have this awesome life, you know, kind of doing nothing. So I sold everything in 6 months. It wasn't just Orcon, I sort of sold everything. I had all this money in the bank. And, you know, there was literally a day where there was sort of the handover and the check, and then the next day I didn't have anything to do.
What was that like?
And, you know, it was kind of weird, and I guess I just, you know, my whole identity had been wrapped up in my companies. I had 120 staff as a 29-year-old. So there was all this hive of activity, there's always people calling me, there's always some midnight emergency. And all of that stopped. And then if I talked to anyone, you know, I'd sort of say, oh, hi, you know, I'm Seeby, I founded Orcon, and they'd say, oh, that's interesting, you know, great, awesome.
Yeah.
What are you doing now? Oh, nothing. Oh, do you have a business card? No. Oh, cool, well, I'll see you later then, you know. So I couldn't really kind of, didn't seem to have any link to the business community, you know. No one cared if I'm just a bum that's retired, you know, it's not interesting. And yeah, I was living in a 2-bedroom rented house, you know, and I had $20 million in the bank. So I kind of thought, oh, great, I'll just go and buy, you know, a huge house and that kind of thing. And this was pre the global financial crisis. So although I had some concerns about a downturn, I bought a $10 million house at 30% below valuation, absolute monstrosity of a house on 3 different sections on a cliff, and, you know, just a total fantasy of a property. And I sort of thought, I'll hang out, because it's better than living in a 2-bedroom house. I've got all this money, and you know, then when I want to sell it, it'll be easy to sell. And you know, I've been in that house ever since. I can't sell it, and So I sort of wish that I just put the money in the bank and spent 3 or 4 years overseas. But what I've done is I've turned that around and borrowed against the property, and I've got a $27 million commercial property portfolio, and read a few Bob Jones books, and got stuck into that. So I had a restraint of trade. I wasn't allowed to do anything in the internet space, so I got into commercial property in a reasonable way, and it's been great fun, and now I'm back to the internet.
And you've started a brand new company in the telecommunications area. It's called Voyager.
That's right.
So what are you going to do different this time?
So it's funny how there's sort of a circle of life, and some people remember, some people won't, but Voyager was actually one of New Zealand's first internet companies. It was one of the biggest, and at one stage it was bigger than Extra and that kind of thing. And funnily enough, the real job I ever had was on the help desk at Voyager, and then I got sort of told to leave once I decided to start Orcon. So it's sort of a circle of life in that Voyager went out of business because it was owned in the end by a big American company called MCL WorldCom. MCL WorldCom went bust in a huge corporate scandal, and then the sort of assets in New Zealand got abandoned. So I bought the Voyager brand when I was running Orcon. It was kind of shelved, I didn't really think about it, and then when my restraint of trade from the sale of Orcon ended, I kind of thought, I should get back into the internet space and do something. And then I suddenly remembered that I had the Voyager brand sitting there and the domain names and everything, and decided to reinvigorate it. So it's sort of like I've come right back full circle to my roots, to the first company and only company I ever worked for, and now that's the sort of brand I'm reinvigorating. But people remember it as a great ISP, and now I'm focused solely on business and solutions and service and that sort of thing, whereas Orcon was quite a residential consumer broad play. So I enjoy the focus of really delivering amazing service to a business customer base.
Now everyone thinks that if they have 20 million in the bank, they're going to be happy. You're a person that can tell us the truth. Does $20 million in the bank make you happy?
Yeah, it definitely doesn't. It just allows, I guess there's that corny saying that having more money just allows you to choose your misery, and that's true. So I mean, I obviously can't complain. I can to a degree do what I want, but the more money you have to a degree, the more problems you have, and that the more things you own, the more they own you. So I've got this huge house, which is great, but I've got a gardener and a groundskeeper and all sorts of things, and there's always something wrong with the fish tanks, and then there's this and that. So you end up worrying about all this crap. Whereas if I just had a simple apartment, I could just kind of lock it up and leave, and wouldn't be having to think about anything. So more money carries more responsibility. I've got 30 employees, and they rely on me to make the right decisions and feed their families and that kind of thing. But I like that, and now that I'm back in truly in business, sort of I'm split between property and internet, and I've got some things in the middle of those. There's some sort of synergies between those two businesses, believe it or not.
Now, what do you know about us baby boomers?
Yeah, I mean, I guess.
What's your advice to us baby boomers in the telecommunications industry? What do you think's going to be the best thing for us, and we should look at it very carefully?
Last year, Apple released Siri for iPhone, which is basically natural voice recognition, kind of a personal assistant. The first iteration, is sort of fairly basic, but we've kind of finally got that robot slave we've all been dreaming about, and I think in a couple of years, people will be amazed what you can do. I bought an application off the iPhone App Store the other day, and it allows you to say anything to your phone in 140 different languages, and then it will say it in another language to whoever you're standing next to. So
Marvelous.
We're very, very close to having
overseas.
We're very, very close to having a sort of universal translator. Now, there's a few problems with that. One of the things is that international roaming charges and things on mobile networks are too expensive, so you'd end up with a $5,000 bill. But those things again will be resolved in a couple of years, and then you'll be able to take your smartphone anywhere in the world and communicate with just about everyone, which will be a huge revolution. The first sequencing of the human genome took 13 years, and it was started in 1989, 1990. Didn't finish until 2003. Had a cost of $3 or $4 billion to sequence the first human genome. Now, I saw on the internet the other day, you can buy a USB thumb drive for about $299 US. You put a drop of blood on it, and it will sequence your own human genome in a few hours at a cost of a few $100s.
Final question: when you wake up in the morning, Seeby, when your eyes open, do you think, wow, another great day?
Well, it's good to wake up and be this good looking anyway, but
yeah. You must be taking the good looking pills.
Yeah. I think everyone has a base level of happiness, and it's been proven in surveys and things that people that win lotto often end up less happy than they were before, because there's sort of more uncertainty around their life. So
they've gone right
they
out
get
of
very, very happy, and then they get a little bit less happy, and then they sort of return to a base. So, I mean, even people that have arms amputated and things, they're obviously miserable for a while, and then they just kind of go back to a base level of happiness. So most of us have an innate level. When I'm most happy is when I'm sort of got something to create, something to achieve. So for me, having a company that functions as a kind of beautiful organism, a perfectly functioning kind of thing, is the greatest achievement. And I sort of look up to Steve Jobs in that way, that his focus at Apple was always on creating beautiful products that worked better than the competition, whose focus wasn't really making money. He paid himself $1 a year. So it was that sort of fanatical obsession with getting it right, and that's the same sort of thing that I have. I derive satisfaction from creating something that's greater than a sum of its parts.
You are a creator. Seeby, you've been wonderful.
Thank you.
You're going to come on the program again.
Yeah.
We need more information about this. We didn't get time to talk about it, so we're going to have you back on.
Okay, great. Come back whenever you like.